There are a number of elements, of course, that are important in building a resilient community. The first one that comes to mind is that the people in the community should themselves be empowered in the sense that they must have access to information, and they must have perhaps had the opportunity to either have training or discussed among themselves what are the problems that they face and what are the possible solutions, so that when problems do occur that they encounter and need to cope with, they have an idea of what is the appropriate response. For example, if it's a natural disaster like a typhoon or an earthquake, it is a qualification or a characteristic of resilient communities that they may have had significant training in advance of exactly what they need to do to cope with such disasters. If it is an economic problem or a downturn in the economy and there's a lot of poverty and unemployment, I guess that's a little bit more complicated situation. But there again, I think it is a question of the community talking about the problems themselves and coming up with their own solutions. Now, the other element is access to the resources that they need so that they can in fact cope. Again, looking at, I guess, the example of a natural disaster, there are many occasions when communities cannot deal with these disasters themselves, and they do need assistance. So the presence of a very strong local leadership is oftentimes a major ingredient in communities being either resilient or whether they have difficulty in coping with these issues. So a strong national leadership that is well versed on what is required to cope with these problems. A community that is empowered in the sense that they have the information available, and then access to resources. And I think that's where the business community often comes in. The business community, of course, has access to tremendous resources to deal with all sorts of contingencies. And again, in the case of natural resources, they can mobilize either immediate relief assistance or long-term assistance in the rehabilitation of communities. But the important thing is not for corporations to impose what they believe is needed by the community, but for the communities to be the ones to express to their partners, whether their partners are the business community or the national government, for example, or even local government, to express what they think are their priority needs. So it goes back to the community itself being in a position to express themselves so that they are able to direct the assistance that may be available to them to their priority needs. And I think those are the types of communities that probably do best in manifesting resiliency in the face of natural or man-made calamities.